Most people see 47 Hells Angels parked outside a church hall on a Wednesday afternoon, and they make certain assumptions. They see trouble. They see danger. They see something that doesn't belong in a parking lot that usually holds minivans and a deacon's 10-year-old Buick. They see leather and chrome and men who look like they have not always been on the correct side of a courtroom, and they pull their coats tighter and they walk the other way, and they do not stop to ask questions. But on a Wednesday in December in the town of Harlan, Kentucky, 47 men who had ridden in from 4 states through freezing rain were not there to cause trouble. They were there because of a casserole dish, a blue ceramic casserole dish with a white lid, packed in a cardboard box with a folded dish towel on top that an 82-year-old widow named Naomi Grace Tillman had carried to the roadside in both arms on a Tuesday morning in October, 2 months earlier, 211 miles away, and held out to a man on a motorcycle who had stopped on her road because his engine had overheated, and he was sitting on the gravel shoulder wondering what came next. She had not asked if he was hungry. She had not asked what he was doing on Shepherd Road, which was a dead-end county road that almost no one used, or where he was going, or why he was alone. She had simply come out of her house carrying the casserole dish and set it on the seat of his motorcycle, the only flat surface available, and said, "I made too much again. I always make too much. Frank used to say I cooked for an army. Frank's been gone 11 years now." Then she had gone back inside, and something happened to Dax Morrow, 44 years old, Cherokee Mountain Chapter, Hells Angels out of Harlan, that he spent the next 2 months trying to find words for. He found them at a chapter meeting on a Tuesday night in December, sitting in a metal folding chair under fluorescent lights with 46 men who had ridden with him for years, and who were looking at him with the particular attention of men who know when something real is being said. What happened next would not leave any of them the same. Shepherd Road runs off Route 119 in Harlan County, Kentucky, into the kind of hollow that the mountains make when they fold in on themselves. Steep-walled, narrow, the road hugging the creek on one side and the ridge on the other. The trees coming in close overhead so that even in October, with the leaves mostly down, the light arrives at an angle and arrives thin. It is the kind of road that takes you somewhere specific or nowhere at all, depending on who you are. In October, it smells of wood smoke and creek water, and the particular cold of mountain shade that arrives before the calendar is ready for it. The house at the end of Shepherd Road was white once. It was the color now of something that had been white for a long time and had made its peace with becoming the color of old wood and weathered paint and the particular dignity of a structure that has outlasted its construction. The porch sagged slightly on the left side. The gutters needed attention. The garden along the front was cut back for winter, but cut back with the care of someone who knows what will come up in spring and wants it to come up right. On the porch there was a rocking chair and a small table and a coffee can with the brushes standing in it, bristles up, because someone had been painting something recently. The porch rail, it turned out, freshly done in white, the left side finished and the right side still waiting. Dax Morrow had not planned to be on Shepherd Road. He had turned off Route 119 on an instinct. The engine had been running hot for 2 miles, and he needed to get off the main road before it became in traffic, and had coasted to the shoulder on a quiet dead-end county road and killed the engine, and sat in the October silence listening to the block tick as it cooled. He was 44 years old, and had the road in his face in the way that men get when they have been riding since. They were 19, not eroded exactly, but settled, the way geography settles, the features finding their final positions and staying there. He had been with Cherokee Mountain Chapter for 16 years. He was the road captain. He had 3 ex-wives and 2 daughters he saw twice a year on the good years and once on the others, and he was riding alone on a Tuesday because the chapter had business in Pikeville, and he had gone ahead to scout the route and gotten turned around by a road closure on 119, which was how he came to be on Shepherd Road, with an overheated engine and nothing to look at but mountains and his own thoughts. His thoughts lately had not been good company. There had been a thing in August, a thing with a member of the chapter, a man named Garrett who had been with them for 8 years and who had been, as it turned out, doing something with the chapter's charitable fund that 8 years of trust had made easy to conceal and difficult to believe. It had been discovered. It had been dealt with. But the dealing with it had left a damage that was not quite the same as the damage the original thing had done. It was quieter, and it went deeper, And Dax had found himself in the 2 months since, sitting across from men he had ridden with for years, and feeling for the first time like the foundation had shifted in a way he couldn't measure and couldn't name. He was thinking about this when the screen door of the White House opened. He had not noticed the house from the road. He had not noticed the woman watching from the porch. He had not noticed the rocking chair or the fresh paint on the rail or the coffee can with the brushes until she was already coming down the porch steps with the casserole dish in both arms, carrying it the way you carry something you don't intend to drop, carefully and with your whole body engaged in the task. He got off the bike. She came to him as naturally as if she had been expecting him. She set the casserole dish on the seat of the Harley, the only flat surface, and straightened up and looked at him with gray eyes that were clear and direct and not remotely impressed by any of the things about him that usually impressed people or, more commonly, sent them in the other direction. "I made too much again," she said. "I always make too much. Frank used to say I cooked for an army. Frank's been gone 11 years now." Then she turned around. "There are plates on the porch," she said, over her shoulder. "You can leave the dish when you're done. I'll get it later." She went back inside. The screen door closed behind her. Dax stood on Shepherd Road in the October cold looking at a blue ceramic casserole dish sitting on the seat of his Harley Davidson and felt, for a reason he could not immediately identify, like he was going to cry. He had not cried since his father's funeral 14 years ago. He was not a man who cried. He stood very still on the gravel shoulder and breathed the mountain air and waited for the feeling to pass. It didn't pass. It changed into something else, something that settled in behind his sternum and stayed there, warm and strange and not entirely comfortable, the way warmth feels when you've been cold for longer than you knew. He took a plate from the porch. He sat on the step. He ate. Before I tell you what was in that casserole dish, not the food, but the thing underneath the food, the thing Dax Morrow spent 2 months trying to name, hit subscribe if you're new here, and drop your city in the comments right now. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to see this map. I read every single comment now. Back to Shepherd Road, back to Naomi Grace Tillman, because she had a name, and she had a life, and she had been carrying something a long time before Dax Morrow's engine overheated on a county road on a Tuesday in October. And you need to know who she was before you can understand what she did. Her name was Naomi Grace Tillman. She was 82 years old, and she had lived at the end of Shepherd Road for 57 of those years, in the White House that she and Frank had bought the spring after they married, when the house was already old and needed work, and Frank had said they would fix it up together, and they had, room by room, over the course of a marriage that lasted 46 years and produced 3 children, and a garden that Naomi still tended with the precision of a woman who understood that the things you plant in patience outlast everything else. Frank Tillman had died on a Tuesday in October 11 years ago, his heart sudden, no warning, the way hearts go when they have decided they are done. Naomi had been in the kitchen. She had heard him call her name from the back porch, with a sound that was not quite his normal voice, and she had been to him in seconds and had held his hand and talked to him while the ambulance took 40 minutes to navigate the county roads, and he had gone quietly, which she was grateful for, and which had not made it easier. She had stayed in the house, her children had said, with the concerned helplessness of adult children who live far away and feel guilty about it, that the house was too large and too remote and too much work, and she should consider something more manageable. She had considered it, and concluded that the house was exactly the right size, because it was the size of her life, and the remoteness was a feature, and the work was how she knew she was still herself. She had said this to her oldest, Patricia, in the clear and final way she said things when the discussion was finished. Patricia had said she worried. Naomi had said that was allowed. The cooking had always been hers. She had cooked for Frank for 46 years. 3 meals a day when the children were home, 2 after they left, 1 large meal in the evening after Frank retired, and they had discovered, in their 60s, the particular pleasure of eating slowly together without an agenda. She cooked from habit and from memory, and from the particular knowledge that comes from feeding people for 5 decades, the knowledge that food is not fuel, that it is the oldest language, that setting a plate in front of someone says something that words either can't reach or don't bother to try. She still cooked for 2. 11 years in, she still cooked for 2. She had tried cooking for 1. It had not worked. Her hands didn't know how to do it. The ratios were wrong in a way she couldn't correct by having the recipe. It wasn't the quantities. It was the intention behind the quantities, the fact that cooking for one is an act you do for yourself, and cooking for two is an act you do for someone else. And she's still, in the place where cooking happened, doing it for someone else. So she cooked for two, and she brought what was left to the church hall, or to the Hendersons down the road who had a new baby and no time, or to whoever was available to receive it. And sometimes no one was available. On a Tuesday in October, with a chicken and white bean casserole cooling on the counter and no one to bring it to, she had looked out the kitchen window at the sound of a motorcycle pulling to the shoulder of Shepherd Road, and she had watched the man get off and stand in the cold looking at his engine. And she had made a decision with the completeness of a woman who has been making decisions by herself for 11 years and does not agonize. She had picked up the casserole dish and gone outside. What she had not told Dax Morrow, as he sat on her porch step eating the meals she had made for Frank and for herself, and for the life she was still living without him, what she had not told him because it was not a thing you said to a stranger, and because she had not told anyone, and because she was 82 years old and did not need to be told she was not managing, was that she had not been well. The falls had started in August, 2 of them minor, not reported to anyone, corrected with the dignity of a woman who corrects her own errors privately. Her hip was not right. The porch rail on the right side was still unpainted, because she had run out of days when she felt like standing on the step, and she had not felt like admitting that. The freezer was full of meals she had made in batches on her good days, so that on her not good days she did not have to think about it. She was managing. She just was not certain how much longer managing was going to be the right word. His name was Boyd Crane. He was 51 years old, Naomi's nearest neighbor by half a mile, and he had been nearest neighbor for 6 years without meaningfully being neighborly, which was his preference, and which Naomi had accommodated, because she was not in the habit of forcing herself on people who had indicated by their behavior that they did not want forcing. But Boyd Crane's relationship to Naomi's property had changed in the last year in ways that were slow and deniable and consistent, which was the pattern of a man who understood that slow and deniable was more effective than fast and obvious. It had started with the boundary. There was a survey line between the Tillman property and the Crane property that had been agreed upon and marked when Frank was alive. Boyd Crane had, over the last 18 months, moved that line in incremental adjustments, a fence post here, a cleared section of tree line there, each adjustment small enough to be a mistake or a misremembering, each one requiring Naomi to object in order to be corrected, and objecting required energy and documentation and the willingness to be in conflict with a man who lived half a mile from the only house on a county road that did not see much traffic. She had objected twice. Both times Boyd had been puzzled, apologetic, and had made partial corrections that left him with a net gain. He had also, in the last 6 months, begun to make visits, not social visits. Boyd Crane was not a social man. They were the visits of a man who was building a case, stopping by with observations about the porch, about the gutters, about the state of the property in winter, about whether Naomi had thought about what happened to a house when the person maintaining it was no longer able to maintain it. He said these things with the gentle persistence of someone who means well and is simply being practical, and Naomi received them with the stillness of a woman who knows exactly what is being built and is too tired, on some days, to dismantle it as fast as it goes up. He wanted the property. He had wanted it for 6 years. He had been patient. And Naomi Grace Tillman, 82 years old, 2 falls in August, the porch rail half painted, the freezer full of contingency meals, had begun. In the small hours of night she did not talk about, to wonder if patience might eventually win. She had not told her children. She had not told the church. She had not told anyone. Until the morning a motorcycle pulled to the shoulder of Shepherd Road and a man sat down on her porch step and ate her casserole and looked up when he was finished with eyes that were doing something complicated, and she had come out to retrieve the dish and he had said, "That's the best thing I've eaten in a long time. I don't know why, but it is." She had looked at him. She had said, "Frank used to say the same thing." He had nodded. He had looked at the mountains. He had said, "How are you doing out here? On your own?" And Naomi Grace Tillman, who had not answered that question honestly since Frank died, had told him. She told him about Boyd Crane. She told him about the boundary adjustments and the visits and the gentle, persistent suggestions about the property's future. She told him with the measured precision of a woman who has been keeping notes. Literally, in a small notebook in the kitchen drawer, dates and observations, the way Frank had taught her to keep records of anything that might matter later. She told him without asking for anything. She told him the way you tell someone the truth when they have asked directly. And you have decided, in the unreasoning way you sometimes decide things, that they are a person you can tell it to. Dax listened. When she was done, he said, "Do you have a lawyer?" She said the family had used a man in Harlan for 30 years, but he had retired. He said, "I know someone. He's good. He does property law. He's been with our chapter for 15 years. I'd like to have him call you, if you're willing." She looked at him. "Why would you do that?" she said. He looked at the casserole dish, clean now and sitting on the porch rail between them. "Because you fed me when I didn't know I was hungry," he said. "And not just the food." She was quiet for a moment. "Frank would have liked you," she said. He put the dish in the cardboard box she produced from somewhere, neatly packed with a dish towel folded on top. He rode back down Shepherd Road toward Route 119. He thought about what she'd said about cooking for two. He thought about the chapter, about August, about Garrett and the fund and the particular silence that had settled into the meeting room since then, the way a room feels after something has been taken out of it that was holding it together. He thought about 46 years. He thought about what it meant to still be setting two plates after 11 years of eating alone. He rode to Pikeville. He did his job. He rode home. And for the next 6 weeks, he sat with what Shepherd Road had done to him and did not know what to do with it until the chapter meeting in December, when Dex Rutherford, who had been with the chapter for 12 years and who was not a man given to personal speeches, had said, looking at the table, "I don't know what happened to us in August, but something's still wrong, and I think we all know it, and nobody's saying it." The room had gone quiet, and Dax Morrow had said, "I need to tell you about a woman on Shepherd Road." He told them about the casserole dish. He told them about sitting on the porch step in October. He told them about eating a meal made for someone who had been gone 11 years and feeling, for a reason he still could not fully explain, like something he had been carrying for a long time had been set down. He told them about the 2 falls in August and the boundary fence and the kitchen notebook and the half-painted porch rail and Boyd Crane's patient, accumulating erosion of a woman who deserved better than to be eroded. He told them about cooking for two. He told it the way a man tells something he has been trying to find language for, not polished, not organized, full of the stops and starts of a person working the words out in real time. The room was very still when he finished. Dex Rutherford said, "What does she need?" Dax said, "Right now, the lawyer, the property line documented properly, someone to deal with Crane formally. After that?" Dax looked at his hands. "She's 82 years old," he said. "She lives at the end of a county road. She feeds strangers because she doesn't know what else to do with the food she makes for someone who isn't there anymore." He paused. "I think she needs to know she's not alone on that road." The room did not discuss this. It did not require discussion. Dex Rutherford said, "Wednesday." 46 heads nodded. Engines. Boyd Crane heard them before he saw them, had stepped onto his front porch with his coffee at 9:30 on Wednesday morning, and stood listening to a sound that did not belong on Shepherd Road, that did not belong in Harlan County in December, that built from a distant rolling vibration into something that seemed to come from multiple directions at once, and grow as it came until his coffee went cold in his hand, and he was still standing on the porch when the first bike turned off Route 119 onto Shepherd Road. Then the second, then 45 more, then behind those 47, the vehicles that had followed them from 4 states, a truck with supplies, 2 more bikes, a car carrying the property lawyer, and 2 printed copies of a new survey that had been completed over the weekend by a licensed firm out of Hazard, Kentucky, commissioned at chapter expense, showing exactly where the boundary between the Tillman and Crane properties had all and where it currently was. They did not stop at Boyd Crane's house. They drove past. They pulled into the gravel drive of the White House at the end of Shepherd Road, and they parked with the methodical quiet of men who have a job and know how to do it. Naomi Grace Tillman was on the porch when they arrived. She was wearing her good coat. She had known they were coming. Dax had called on Sunday briefly and told her that some people from his chapter wanted to come by and help with a few things if she was willing. And she had said she was willing in the measured voice of a woman who does not make a fuss over things, even when the things are considerable. She had not expected 47. She stood on the porch with her hand on the freshly painted rail, right side finished now, done by a neighbor woman from the church who had finally heard about the hip, had shown up on Saturday without being asked and painted it in 3 hours while Naomi sat in the rocking chair and told her about Frank, and she watched the motorcycles fill her drive and the truck pull in behind them, and she watched Dax Morrow get off the lead bike and come up the walk. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He was carrying a casserole dish, blue ceramic, white lid, not hers, a new one, packed in a cardboard box with a dish towel folded on top. He held it out. "We brought lunch," he said, "from about 15 different people who all thought they were bringing the main dish. So there's a lot." Naomi looked at the dish. She looked at the 46 men standing in her drive. "Frank always said I cooked for an army," she said. "Turns out I was just early." Behind Dax, 46 men who had not laughed together in 4 months laughed. It was the right sound. The sound a room makes when something that was knotted begins to loosen. The sound that Dax Morrow had been trying to get back since August and had not known how to find, and had found in the end, not at a chapter meeting or on a long ride, but on a dead-end county road in October, sitting on an old woman's porch steps eating a meal made for someone 11 years gone. The property lawyer served Boyd Crane the survey documentation that afternoon through his own front door. Boyd Crane, confronted with documentation prepared by a licensed firm and delivered in the company of 47 men who were standing in his neighbor's driveway visible from his kitchen window, did not dispute the findings. The fence posts were moved back to the correct line before the following weekend. The visits stopped. The chapter returned to Naomi's property 3 more times that winter. They repaired the gutter on the north side of the house and the left corner of the porch and the section of fence along the garden that had healed over in November and which Naomi had been meaning to get to. They did this without ceremony and without making it an occasion, the way you do work for someone you intend to come back to. Naomi Grace Tillman remained at the end of Shepherd Road. She cooked. On the 3rd visit, in February, she had enough notice to prepare, and she set out enough food on the kitchen table and the 2 card tables borrowed from the church hall to feed 47 men. And she sat at the head of Frank's table and watched the men fill the plates she had been setting for 11 years. And she did not say anything about it, because there was nothing to say that the scene did not already say more completely. She wrote it in her notebook that evening, not the boundary adjustments, not Boyd Crane, a new entry on a fresh page, February 14th, 47 for lunch. The kitchen was full. Frank would have been in the middle of it. She closed the notebook. She looked at the kitchen, the cleared table, the stacked dishes, the smell of 47 people and food and winter coats and coffee that had gone all afternoon, the particular warm disorder of a room that has been used for its purpose. She picked up her pen. She opened the notebook again. She added 1 line. It still is. There is a thing that happens when someone feeds you without asking if you're hungry. Something underneath the food that has nothing to do with the food. Naomi Grace Tillman knew this for 57 years of marriage and 11 years of widowhood, and she knew it with the certainty of a woman who has given this gift to more people than she has counted and never expected anything. She did not expect anything back. She got 47 men in her driveway and a chapter that remembered what it was. If this story reached you, if you believe that the simplest acts of care are sometimes the ones that travel the farthest, hit like and share it with someone who still knows how to feed people. Subscribe so you're here for the next one. And drop a comment below. Tell me about someone who fed you when you didn't know you were hungry, the meal or the person or both. I want to read every one of them.